Hello, everybody. Good to see you. Let's let's get going. Let's get going. Give me a second to get all the text set up here. Here we go. There we go. All right. Hello, hello, hello. Just wait for people to get notified that I'm live. This is day 5 of the sugar reset. Yay! So lovely to have you here, whether you're joining me live or watching on the replay. I want to just start today by taking a moment because this week might not have been a light one for you. It's been 5 days of real, honest conversation about something that actually most wellness content kind of glosses straight over. Um, 5 days of me asking you questions that you might not have thought of before, 5 days of looking at your own patterns, and that takes something. So I'm glad that you showed up for it. I really am grateful and I hope you are enjoying it. But now I want to ask you something to sort of open today, day 5 of this sugar reset. I want you to think back to Monday. I want you to think about what you understood then about why sugar feels so hard after cancer, the biology, the terrain, the stress response, the way the food environment is working against you, the reason restriction almost always backlashes against you. How much of that did you know 5 days ago? For most of you, I'd guess, you probably heard bits and pieces, but maybe you hadn't put the pieces together, or at least not in the way that we've talked about it this week, cancer specific. And that matters because understanding is the foundation that everything else has to be built on. You can't build anything sustainable on top of a story that says that it's your fault. You just need to try harder. That story has to go first. So this week has done something real, I hope. But I also want to be honest with you about what this week hasn't done. Because 5 days of conversation, even really good conversation, doesn't change your terrain, right? It doesn't resolve the stress response your nervous system has been holding on to for months or years. It doesn't repair metabolic dysregulation that treatment may have contributed to. It doesn't rebuild your sleep or rebalance your hormones or quiet the inflammatory patterns running in the background of how you feel every day. Understanding why the water is cloudy is not the same as cleaning it. If that doesn't make sense to you, let me talk about the fish tank analogy that I use all the time. I want you to imagine, hi Susan, I want you to imagine a fish tank and a little fishy is happily swimming around in the tank, but no one's cleaning the tank. So over time, the water gets cloudy, a little murky. Maybe there's bits floating around, and then the fish gets sick. So we throw medicine into the tank, and the fish recovers. I just have a question. How likely is it that the fish will stay well until we clean the water in the tank? Understanding why the water is cloudy, right? That we haven't balanced the pH or whatever, is not the same as cleaning it. And that's the gap that I want to talk about today because I see it all the time. And I think it's one of the most important things to talk about in a week like this one. Most of the women who find their way into this community are not short on information. They've read the books, they followed the accounts, they've downloaded the guides, mine, other people's, tried various things, they know a lot, and they're still struggling. Not because the information was necessarily wrong, but because information doesn't solve anything. Even good, accurate, well-intentioned information doesn't translate into change. especially not for a body and a nervous system like yours that are carrying what yours is carrying. The translation from knowing to doing actually requires something more. It requires a framework that was built for your starting conditions. Support that actually accounts for where you are, not where a generic program or info assumes that should be or where you should be. And usually someone in your corner who understands both the clinical picture and the human experience of navigating cancer and recovery. Hi, Kathy. Because those two things are not the same and you need both. This week, I've talked a lot about the terrain, the fish tank, the water. I want to spend a few minutes today giving you a fuller picture about what changing that water actually looks like in practice. Because it's not a supplement protocol. It's not the magic this or the magic that or an elimination plan. It's more structured than that. And it's a lot more personal. Your terrain is shaped by a number of interconnected pillars. Chronic inflammation, which treatment can increase. Menopause, perimenopause can increase. Your hormonal environment, whether you're on hormonal therapy or not, because estrogen, cortisol, insulin, thyroid function are all profoundly disrupted by what you've been through. Your immune system doesn't just bounce back on its own after treatment. It often takes intentional targeted support. Your gut health, which chemotherapy and any antibiotics or steroids you might have had have hit hard, but I bet you weren't told about that. Your sleep, which I'd argue is the single most powerful terrain shifter available to you, is also one of the first things that treatment and fear, the emotional side, completely derail. Your stress response in your nervous system, because chronic stress totally reshapes your hormonal and inflammatory environment in ways that are purely physiological. Your nutrition, your movement, and everyday exposures that increase your toxic load, those quietly influence your terrain in ways most women never even think about. These are all things that are making the water dirty for that fish. And these pillars interact with each other constantly, which means when you work on them together as a system, you get a compounding effect that you simply can't replicate by adjusting one little thing at a time. That's the difference between cleaning the water and just, I don't know, adjusting the water's temperature or changing the pH of the water. Now, I wanted to talk a lot more about that. So I have an event next week that I think you should know about. Next Wednesday, April 22nd at 6 p.m. Eastern, I'm hosting a live free training on Zoom called Rebuild, the Cancer Recovery Framework for Women who want to do more than just survive. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about it because it's not a general review of everything we've talked about this week. It goes a lot deeper. In Rebuild, I'm going to walk you through the 4 concepts that together form like the complete picture of what cancer recovery actually requires. The gap between your treatment plan and your recovery plan and why that gap exists structurally. Going to go through the terrain framework in full with the 8 lifestyle medicine pillars and what each of them actually means for a body that's been through what yours has. The real cost to you of leaving your terrain unsupported, not just physically, but in your mental health, your fear of recurrence, your cognitive function, and the quality of your life. And then I'm going to talk about the path, what a structured, evidence-informed terrain change plan actually looks like phase by phase, calibrated to where you actually are. I'm also going to show you something I think a lot of women in this community have never been told clearly, that the side effects you've been told are just your new normal, you know, the joint pain, the hot flashes, the fatigue, the brain fog, the weight changes, the mood that's harder than to manage than it used to be. Those are all terrain effects. We don't get a lot of help with those. These terrain effects respond to terrain work. Normal means common. It doesn't mean permanent. And it doesn't mean that there's nothing that can be done. And I don't want you to be normal. I want you to be optimal anyway. So that's what Rebuild is, the event next week. It's a proper training. And if you've found this week interesting, you should show up. The link to register is in the comments. I'd really love to see you there. There is, I've been writing it all day today. There is a terrain self-assessment that is a little free Prezi from me if you join me live. So before I let you go, your day 5 reflection prompt is in your workbook, and it's a super simple one. What is one thing that you've noticed this week about your patterns, your body, your history with this that you want to understand better or actually do something about? I want you to write it down because that's your starting point, not a generic one, yours, right? It's a real starting point, not just a reflection. It's information about your terrain. We need to reset sugar for sure, but it is just one small component of the other things that need to be done. Your body will thank you. Your mind will thank you. At almost 58 now, birthday coming up, at almost 58, I feel better than I did in my 20s. And most of the time, there's no reason that that can't be you as well. And that's what I want for you. So thank you for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments. This community shows up with such honesty and such willingness to look at sometimes hard stuff. And it really has been a privilege to spend 5 days with you in this conversation. I hope I'll see you next Wednesday. And of course, over the coming weeks, we'll talk about what is coming up in May. All right, everybody, have a lovely evening. I hope to see you on Wednesday. Take care.